The adventuring crew plays Curse of Strahd with
Esterith as Theron DeLon.
I quit as Shoehorn Butterhorse.
Rob as Kahal.
Wembley as Basgalub.
Sidel as Vale Willarest.
and Smokey as your DM. Music provided by Upbeat.io. Original art by Vintage Cartoon. Episode 0, Part 5. Hi, can you introduce yourself and tell us how long you've been playing tabletop RPGs?
Hi everyone, this is Wembley. I've been playing RPGs most of my life, but not very consistently. So I've tried many times to get into a longer continuous game and haven't been successful until recently. So I have some experience. I probably started like 5 or 6 campaigns throughout my life, but only really completed one.
So that's quite a journey to play in a campaign and quite a bit of effort put in. What made you interested in putting in all this effort trying to play, either draw you into D&D or tabletop RPGs in general?
I think, I have a love of fantasy. I grew up reading fantasy books. I've always liked the kind of fantasy worlds, and I think D&D provides kind of a really free-form way to engage in fantasy worlds of varying stripes in a very, to me at least, intriguing way.
Awesome. So obviously in those fantasy books and in the games that you've tried to play, there's a whole bunch of characters. What is sort of your favorite type of character to play?
That's a tough question to answer, because I think what I always end up playing is someone that is kind of heroic, possibly kind of a chaotic good character. But I've always wanted to try to stretch myself, and then I find myself falling back into that more heroic role.
Really? So do you think that more falls from who you are, or sort of the characters that you build and the tropes in fantasy in general?
I think it comes from who I am, not that I myself am particularly heroic, but I think I always get to the point where the idea of doing, bad things or less than ideal things grates at me a little bit, and I end up falling back on I've got to be, the hero sort of thing.
Makes sense. So looking back at both the game that you've finished and the other games that you've tried to start, do you have a favorite moment from those games, either something very epic and memorable or something that was just hilarious and a fun time at the table?
I think for me, maybe this is only hilarious to me, but there was this one campaign I did when I was in college. A group of friends, none of us had really done D&D. I'd done a couple at that point. I've tried a previous campaign, but I thought I'd try my hand at DMing. So we were doing our first session, and I was describing essentially the killing of a goblin, and apparently I got a little too into it, and everyone just kind of stared at me like, "What are you doing?" For me, I think that's hilarious. I'm like, "What? I thought we wanted to, theater of the mind." I was trying to describe
I'm being
what happened.
Descriptive.
Yes.
And they're looking at you going, how do you know this much detail about what you're describing?
Exactly.
Yeah. What makes you excited to join the Curse of Strahd campaign that we're going to be running?
So I've heard a lot about Curse of Strahd, but not actually anything specifically about Curse of Strahd. It's almost one of those things that get kind of talked about in, hushed corners amongst people who have played D&D, and I'm very excited to find out why it is seemingly so revered as a setting in a campaign.
And is there, from those hushed whispers and such, is there something specifically that you're looking forward to in this game?
Honestly, meeting Strahd, because that's kind of the through line of all those conversations, is everyone thinks Strahd is a great character.
Okay. do you have any gaming quirks, dice superstitions, rituals, or inside jokes that always shows up at the table?
I don't think so. I have a tendency to make a lot of bad jokes. I'm not sure if that counts as a quirk, but it is something I do frequently.
Okay. Well, now that we know a little bit about you, let's start diving into your character that you're going to be playing. First of all, what's your character's name, ancestry, and class?
Character's name is Bazgalub. He is an orc barbarian on the path of the world tree.
Okay. And how would you describe them to someone meeting them for the first time?
I would describe him kind of as a shorthand as salt of the earth. He comes from a tribe of orcs that are really all about nature. They live in the woods. They do everything they can for themselves as much as possible. Try to limit their trading with others from outside the tribe. So I look at him as someone who is always ready to get his hands dirty and help out around the village.
Okay. And let's say someone was in a tavern with him the night before and came back the next day and was just trying to describe him to the tavern keeper. What would be that one thing, other than being an orc, that they would try and point to try and be like, yeah, that guy that was here last night? What's something that potentially stands out about him?
It would be his clothing. They're made from like animal hides or plant-based materials you can find in the forest, and they're handmade by the tribe, who are pretty good at making their own clothes, but they're not artisans or anything like that. So it's very clear that this is like handmade clothes from hand-gathered materials, and I think that would probably stand out in a normal town setting.
Okay. And then he said he comes from this tribe. Without spoiling too much of your backstory, as much as you're willing to talk about right now, where does he come from and what motivates him to venture?
Yeah, so I guess very briefly, he comes from the Neverwinter Woods. That's where his tribe lives. They're all Path of the World Tree barbarians, so his motivation is essentially trying to protect and spreading the knowledge of the World Tree.
Okay. And then what's something that he might be really good at, or something that he hilariously struggles with? And this doesn't necessarily have to be the list of D&D skills. This can delve into roleplay and stuff like that.
Sure. So I think, living in the woods and living in that kind of environment, he's pretty handy. Not with any particular skill, but he's very used to having to do things for himself and roughing it out in the wilds. So that's something he's pretty good at. But I would say that he's a very straightforward person, so he's not good at subtlety or guile. He really tends to take people at their word, so he's kind of easy to trick.
Okay. Sort of just assumes everyone is being as forthright and honest as he is.
Exactly.
All right. Does he have any trademark weapon, spell, or habit in combat or roleplay?
He has a two-handed maul, and he doesn't go anywhere without it.
Okay. How about any superstitions, rituals, or small items that he might never part with? I'm assuming, coming from this tribe and the Path of the World Tree, that he might have stuff that has come from his tribe with him.
Yeah, so he has a leather bracelet on his right hand. It was given to him by someone that's dear to him, and he doesn't go anywhere without that either. Always the maul, always the bracelet.
Okay. And then finally, if your character could carve out a perfect life after their adventuring days, what would it look like?
He would just return to the Neverwinter Woods. He would live out his life there, ideally in peace, just living off the land, enjoying hanging out with his tribe, rolling his dice with his friends.
Awesome. Well, thank you for introducing your character, and I look forward to getting to roll the dice with you when we have our first game.
I look forward to it too. Thank you.